Hello, dear travelers of the night. Welcome back to Mystic Bedtime Stories, your sanctuary for deep rest and ancient wisdom. I'm your guide through the corridors of time, where forgotten civilizations whisper their secrets to those willing to listen with quiet hearts and open minds. Tonight, as you settle into the embrace of your bed, as your breathing begins to slow and deepen, we're embarking on a journey to one of Earth's most enigmatic places. A journey that will carry you across oceans and centuries, high into the thin air of the Bolivian Altiplano, where the boundary between earth and sky dissolves into mystery. Here on Mystic Bedtime Stories, we believe that sleep is not an ending, but a beginning. Each night, as consciousness gently releases its grip, we have the opportunity to visit realms that daylight cannot reveal. We explore the shadows cast by ancient monuments. We walk through ruins where gods once walked. And we listen to stones that remember songs from before recorded history began. For over 4 years now, thousands of souls have joined us on these nocturnal voyages, finding not just rest, but restoration. They've discovered that within the stories of lost civilizations lie the keys to profound sleep, to dreams that heal, and to mornings that feel somehow more complete. Whether you're a regular traveler on these midnight journeys, or this is your first time joining our circle, you belong here. You are exactly where you need to be. Tonight's destination lies 13,000 feet above the sea, where the air is so thin it seems to blur the line between the physical and the eternal. We're traveling to Tiahuanaco, known to the ancient ones as Tiahuanaco, a name that translates roughly to the stone in the center. But this stone, this place, was far more than a center. It was a gateway, a threshold between worlds, where an entire civilization reached toward the heavens and left behind monuments that continue to puzzle archaeologists and dreamers alike. Imagine, if you will, a landscape so vast and high that it feels like standing on the roof of the world. The Altiplano stretches endlessly in every direction, a rolling plateau of grass and stone beneath a sky so blue it seems to contain eternity itself. Nestled on the southern shore of Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, Tiahuanaco stands as a silent witness to one of the most sophisticated pre-Columbian civilizations in the Andes. But silence, as we'll discover, is not the absence of voice. It is simply a different kind of speaking, one that bypasses the ears and speaks directly to something deeper within us. Here, where the morning mist rises from Lake Titicaca like the breath of sleeping gods, where massive stone blocks fit together with a precision that makes modern engineers pause in wonder, we find the remnants of a people who understood something profound about the relationship between Earth and cosmos, between human ambition and divine mystery. At 4,000 meters above sea level, right in the middle of the Andean plateau, stands the megalithic city of Tiahuanaco, which represents a fascinating enigma and one of the most important places for the archaeology of Latin America. As your head sinks deeper into your pillow now, as your shoulders begin to release the tensions they've been carrying, allow yourself to feel the pull of this ancient place. There's something about Tiahuanaco that calls to a part of us that predates language, that remembers when humanity lived closer to mystery, when the line between the mundane and the sacred was not so sharply drawn. Perhaps it's the sheer audacity of building such monuments at an altitude where every breath requires intention, where the oxygen itself seems to shimmer with otherworldly light. Perhaps it's the way the massive gateway of the sun stands like a doorway into another dimension, its intricate carvings telling stories in a language we've only begun to decipher. Or perhaps it's something simpler and more profound. The recognition that this place was built by people who, like us, looked up at the stars and wondered about their place in the vastness of existence. Tonight, we won't just learn about Tiahuanaco. We won't simply recite archaeological facts or debate theories about construction techniques. Instead, we'll allow this ancient citadel to work its quiet magic upon us. We'll let its stones speak to our dreams, let its mysteries cradle us into the deepest kind of rest. We'll discover that sometimes the most powerful healing comes not from understanding everything, but from surrendering to wonder, from allowing ourselves to be held by questions rather than demanding immediate answers. The people who built Tiahuanaco understood something we're only beginning to remember, that consciousness is not confined to waking hours, that wisdom can be transmitted through stone and starlight, that the most profound truths often come to us not through thinking, but through dreaming. They built their city as a bridge between the earthly and the divine, and tonight, in the gentle hours of your sleep, you'll walk across that bridge yourself. So close your eyes now, dear traveler. Let your breathing find its natural rhythm as we begin our descent into this story, this dream, this journey to a place where the ancient and eternal meet. In just a few moments, we'll step together onto the high plateau of the Altiplano, where the wind carries secrets and the stones remember everything. Welcome to the whispers of ancient Tiahuanaco. Welcome to your journey home to mystery. Welcome to Mystic Bedtime Stories, where every ending is also a beginning, and every sleep is also an awakening. There are places on Earth that seem to exist in the space between worlds, locations so extraordinary that merely standing upon them changes something fundamental within us. Tiahuanaco is such a place, perched on the Bolivian Altiplano, like an ancient ship sailing through an ocean of grass and sky. Picture yourself awakening not in your comfortable bed, but on a morning 13,000 feet above the sea, where the air is crystalline and thin, where each breath carries the essence of eternity itself. The horizon stretches impossibly far in every direction, an endless rolling plateau that seems to touch the very edges of the sky. This is the Altiplano, one of the most vast and elevated plateaus on Earth, a landscape so immense that weather systems are born and die within its boundaries, where storms gather with the patience of centuries and sunsets paint the entire world in colors that have no names. Here, where the morning sun rises like a golden disk through air so pure it seems to magnify the very concept of light itself, you would find yourself standing among stone monuments that have watched this same sunrise for over 1,000 years. Tiahuanaco is a pre-Columbian archaeological site in western Bolivia, near Lake Titicaca, about 70 kilometers from La Paz, and it is one of the largest sites in South America. But these simple facts do nothing to convey the profound sense of otherworldliness that permeates this ancient citadel. The altitude here does something remarkable to consciousness itself. At 13,000 feet, where oxygen is precious and every breath must be intentional, the mind enters a natural state of heightened awareness. Colors seem more vivid, sounds carry further, and the boundary between the self and the infinite landscape begins to blur in ways that feel both disorienting and deeply familiar. Ancient peoples understood this phenomenon, recognizing that certain elevations naturally induce the expanded states of consciousness necessary for profound spiritual experience. As you breathe deeply now, allowing your body to settle into complete relaxation, Imagine breathing this rare Altiplano air, each inhalation carrying not just oxygen, but something else. Something that seems to connect you directly to the vast cosmos stretching overhead. The ancients called this quality of air the breath of the gods, and indeed, there's something divine about a landscape so elevated that clouds form beneath you, where the distinction between earth and heaven becomes beautifully ambiguous. Lake Titicaca spreads across the southern edge of this elevated world like a mirror of the sky itself. Its waters so blue they seem to contain liquid starlight. This is the highest navigable lake on Earth, a body of water so vast that from its shores you cannot see the opposite side, creating the optical illusion of an ocean floating impossibly high among the peaks of the Andes. Legend tells us that a primordial Viracocha emerged out Lake Titicaca, one of the most beautiful and spiritually bodies of water in the world, and located next to Tiahuanaco, the epicenter of ancient pre-Hispanic South American culture. The lake's waters have a quality of stillness that goes beyond the merely physical. In the early morning hours, when mist rises from its surface like the breath of sleeping deities, Titicaca becomes a boundary between dimensions, a place where the reflections of clouds seem more real than the clouds themselves. The indigenous peoples who still call this region home speak of the lake as the womb of creation, the place where the first light was born, where the sun and moon learned to dance their eternal choreography across the Andean sky. It was beside these sacred waters that the builders of Tiahuanaco chose to establish their city, recognizing something that modern archaeology is only beginning to understand, that certain locations on Earth serve as natural amplifiers for human consciousness, places where the ordinary boundaries of perception become permeable, where communication with the sacred becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Feel yourself there now, standing at the edge of this high world, where the wind carries stories in languages older than memory, where every stone has been polished by centuries of starlight and storm. The silence here is not empty, but full, pregnant with the whispers of all who have stood in this place before you, all who have felt their hearts expand in the thin air, all who have understood that they were standing at one of Earth's natural cathedrals, a place where architecture and astronomy, spirituality and stone merge into something greater than the sum of their parts. The very landscape of the Altiplano seems designed to inspire awe and introspection. Rolling hills stretch toward mountains that rise like prayers made stone, their peaks lost in clouds that form and dissolve with the rhythm of breathing. Vicuñas and llamas move across this vastness, like living prayers themselves, their movements so graceful and unhurried that watching them induces a natural state of meditation. But it is the quality of light here that truly sets the Altiplano apart from any other place on Earth. At this altitude, with so little atmosphere to filter the sun's rays, daylight arrives with an intensity and purity that seems to illuminate not just the external world, but something within the observer as well. Colors become more than colors. They become direct transmissions of energy, frequencies that speak to parts of the human soul that have no names, but recognize their home in beauty. As the day progresses and shadows begin their slow dance across the plateau, the massive stones of Tiahuanaco seem to come alive, changing color and character with each shifting angle of light. What appears solid and permanent at noon reveals itself to be fluid and mysterious at sunset, reminding all who observe them, that reality itself is far more flexible and magical than our everyday consciousness typically permits us to perceive. And as night falls over this elevated realm, as the first stars appear in air so clear they seem close enough to pluck like flowers from a cosmic garden, the true magic of Tiahuanaco begins to reveal itself. For this was always a place designed to facilitate communion with the infinite, a stone gateway built by people who understood that the greatest architecture serves not just the body but the soul, not just the present moment, but the eternal dance of existence itself. Let yourself drift deeper now into this ancient landscape, this place where earth meets sky in perfect harmony, where every breath connects you to the vast mystery of being alive on this remarkable planet, in this remarkable universe, blessed with the remarkable gift of consciousness that allows you to perceive and appreciate the profound beauty that surrounds us always, if we only remember how to look, how to listen, how to dream. Who were they, these master builders who chose to create their sacred city in the thin air of the world's roof? As you rest more deeply now, your mind naturally curious, but your body completely at peace, allow yourself to drift back through the mists of time to when Tiahuanaco was not ruins, but a living, breathing center of one of the most sophisticated civilizations the Americas have ever known. The people we call the Tiahuanaco flourished here for over 1,000 years, from roughly 300 to 1,000 in CE, though their origins stretch back much further into the shadows of prehistory. They were master agriculturalists who transformed the harsh highland environment into a garden, engineers who moved massive stones with techniques that still puzzle modern science, and astronomers who read the movements of celestial bodies with an accuracy that rivals our contemporary understanding. But before we speak of their achievements, let us first encounter them as people, as human beings who loved and laughed, who worried about their children, and wondered about their place in the cosmos. Just as we do. Picture a woman standing at the edge of Lake Titicaca at dawn, her breath visible in the cold morning air, her hands cupped around a vessel of warm tea brewed from coca leaves. She gazes across the sacred waters toward the snow-capped peaks of the Cordillera Real, and in her eyes is the same mixture of wonder and belonging that fills anyone who has ever felt truly at home in a landscape that speaks to their soul. These were people intimately connected to their environment, who understood that survival at such altitude required not just physical adaptation, but spiritual alignment with the forces that governed their high world. They developed enlarged hearts and lungs to process the thin air, but more than that, they developed an enlarged sense of the sacred, recognizing divinity in every aspect of their daily existence, from the morning frost that painted their fields with silver, to the evening stars that emerged like ancient friends returning home. The Tiahuanaco were not a single tribe, but a confederation of peoples united by shared beliefs and common purpose. They spoke languages that have been lost to time, though echoes of their words survive in the Quechua and Aymara languages still spoken in the region today. When they called their city Tiahuanaco, they were naming it the stone in the center, but the center of what? Archaeological evidence suggests they understood their settlement to be the center of their cosmological universe, the axis around which all of creation revolved. Their society was sophisticated beyond what the term civilization usually encompasses. They were master metal workers who created bronze tools and ornaments of extraordinary beauty. textile artists, whose weavings displayed mathematical precision and symbolic complexity that scholars are still deciphering, and architects whose understanding of acoustics, astronomy, and sacred geometry produced monuments that seem to bridge the gap between human ambition and divine inspiration. But perhaps most remarkably, they were hydrologists and agricultural engineers who transformed the challenging environment of the Altiplano into one of the most productive farming regions in the ancient world. They created raised field systems called waru-waru that maximized crop yields in the short growing season, developed sophisticated irrigation networks that channeled water from Lake Titicaca across vast distances, and mastered the cultivation of potatoes, quinoa, and other crops that would eventually spread across the globe. As you sink deeper into restful sleep, imagine walking among them during the height of their civilization, when Tiahuanaco was not the windswept ruins we know today, but a thriving metropolis of perhaps 40,000 souls. The city would have pulsed with activity from before dawn until long after sunset, filled with the sounds of stonemasons chiseling blocks with bronze tools, weavers working at their looms while singing traditional songs, children playing games that taught them the movements of the stars, and priests conducting ceremonies that aligned human activity with the great cosmic rhythms. The social structure of Tiahuanaco was complex and nuanced, with skilled artisans, farmers, priests, astronomers, and rulers all playing essential roles in maintaining the delicate balance necessary for life at such altitude. But this was not a hierarchy in the modern sense, where power flows from top to bottom. Instead, it appears to have been a web of interconnected responsibilities, where each person's contribution was understood to be essential to the well-being of the whole. Their spiritual life centered around the worship of Viracocha, the creator deity, who was said to have emerged from the waters of Lake Titicaca to bring order to a chaotic world. But Viracocha was not a distant god ruling from some heavenly throne. Instead, this deity was understood to be present in every aspect of creation, from the massive stones they carved to the smallest flower blooming beside a mountain stream. The Tiahuanaco people possessed an understanding of time that differed fundamentally from our linear conception. They lived within what scholars call cyclical time, where past, present, and future were not separate points on a line, but different aspects of an eternal now. This perspective allowed them to build for millennia rather than decades, to create structures designed to serve not just their immediate needs, but the needs of generations not yet born, and, perhaps more importantly, to maintain a sense of connection with ancestors whose wisdom continued to guide their daily decisions. Their knowledge systems were holistic in ways that our specialized modern world has largely forgotten. A single priest might be simultaneously an astronomer, tracking the movements of celestial bodies, a meteorologist predicting weather patterns crucial for agricultural timing, a mathematician calculating the precise angles needed for stone construction, a psychologist understanding the emotional needs of the community, and a musician whose songs carried encoded information about navigation, medicine, and spiritual practice. Women held positions of significant authority in Tiahuanaco society, serving as priestesses, healers, weavers of sacred textiles, and keepers of agricultural knowledge. Some of the most elaborate burials discovered by archaeologists have been those of women, suggesting that gender roles were more fluid and egalitarian than in many ancient civilizations. The creation stories they told spoke of feminine and masculine principles working together to bring the world into being, reflecting a society that understood cooperation rather than domination as the foundation of lasting prosperity. Their children grew up bilingual in ways we can barely imagine, fluent not just in spoken languages, but in the language of stones and stars, of weather patterns and water flow, of plant growth cycles and animal behavior. Education was not something that happened in separate buildings, but was woven into every aspect of daily life. A child helping to plant potatoes was simultaneously learning mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, and religion, understanding that all knowledge was ultimately one knowledge, all wisdom ultimately one wisdom. The Tiahuanaco maintained extensive trade networks that stretched from the Amazon rainforest to the Pacific Ocean, bringing shells from the coast, gold from distant mountains, exotic feathers from jungle birds, and precious stones from regions hundreds of miles away. But they traded more than material goods. They exchanged ideas, technologies, artistic techniques, and spiritual practices, creating a cultural synthesis that was both uniquely Tiahuanaco and magnificently cosmopolitan. As you rest now in the comfortable darkness of your bedroom, allow yourself to feel the presence of these remarkable people, to sense their dedication to creating something beautiful and lasting in one of Earth's most challenging environments. They were not building monuments to their own glory, but gateways for future generations to maintain connection with the sacred dimensions of existence. They understood that consciousness itself was their most precious resource, and that the purpose of all their magnificent architecture was to create spaces where human awareness could expand beyond its ordinary limitations. The stones they cut and placed with such precision were not just building materials but crystalline repositories of intention, each block positioned to channel specific energies, to facilitate particular states of consciousness, to serve as focal points for meditation and ceremony. They were creating not just a city, but a technology of transcendence, a physical structure designed to support the spiritual development of all who would encounter it, including you, here and now. Across the vast spans of space and time that connect your dreaming mind to their eternal vision of harmony between humanity and the cosmos. Among all the wonders of Tiahuanaco, none captures the imagination quite like the gateway of the sun, standing solitary and magnificent against the endless Altiplano sky. As your breathing deepens and your body releases all tension, allow your consciousness to approach this extraordinary monument, carved from a single block of andesite stone so massive that its very existence seems to challenge the laws of physics and possibility. Picture yourself walking slowly across the high plateau in the golden light of late afternoon, when the sun hangs low enough to cast long shadows that seem to stretch toward infinity. The gateway stands before you like a doorway between dimensions, its precise rectangular opening framing the distant mountains in a way that makes the entire landscape appear to be a carefully composed work of art. This is no accident of placement, no casual positioning of stone, but the result of calculations so sophisticated that modern archaeologists are still discovering new alignments with celestial bodies and seasonal phenomena. The gateway of the sun rises 10 feet into the crystalline air, its massive bulk weighing an estimated 10 tons. Yet it appears to float with an ethereal lightness that seems impossible for such dense volcanic stone. The monument measures 12.5 feet in width, creating proportions that please the eye with mathematical harmony, while simultaneously inspiring a sense of awe that touches something deeper than aesthetic appreciation. This is architecture as spiritual technology, stone transformed into a vehicle for consciousness expansion. But it is the intricate relief carvings that cover the upper portion of the gateway that truly take the breath away and transport the observer into realms of meaning that extend far beyond the merely decorative. Here, carved with a precision that rivals the finest work of any civilization in human history, is a complex iconographic program that appears to encode the entire cosmological understanding of the Tiahuanaco people, their vision of how the universe operates, how divine and human consciousness interface, and how the eternal cycles of creation, destruction, and renewal play out across both cosmic and earthly scales. At the center of this stone symphony sits the figure that scholars have identified as Viracocha, the creator deity, though this identification captures only a fraction of what this remarkable carving actually represents. The central figure is depicted with a radiant headdress that consists of 24 rays, some ending in circles that likely represent celestial bodies, others terminating in the heads of beings that might be understood as angels, ancestors, or aspects of divine consciousness, made manifest in forms recognizable to human perception. Allow yourself to gaze upon this carved divinity with the eyes of contemplation rather than analysis, and you begin to perceive that the figure seems to shift and change, depending upon the angle of light, the time of day, and, perhaps most importantly, the state of consciousness you bring to the encounter. In the morning light, Viracocha appears as a solar deity, radiating life-giving energy across the cosmos. At noon, the figure seems more stern and judicial, a cosmic lawgiver establishing the principles by which existence operates. In the evening, as shadows lengthen and the quality of light grows softer, the deity appears more nurturing and protective, a cosmic parent watching over the unfolding drama of creation with infinite compassion. The eyes of this central figure are perhaps the most arresting feature of the entire gateway, carved with such skill that they seem to follow the observer, creating the uncanny sensation of being recognized, acknowledged, and somehow known by this ancient representation of divine consciousness. These are not the blank eyes of most stone carvings, but windows into something that feels startlingly alive, eternally present, infinitely aware. Visitors to Tiahuanaco often report feeling that they are not merely looking at the gateway, but being looked back at by something that has been watching and waiting for centuries. In the deity's hands are staffs or scepters, symbols of authority and power, but also tools for channeling and directing the cosmic energies that flow through all creation. Some scholars interpret these as agricultural implements, connecting Viracocha to the fertility of the land and the success of crops. Others see them as lightning bolts, identifying the deity with the dramatic thunderstorms that sweep across the Altiplano during the wet season. Still others suggest they represent the axis mundi, the cosmic pillar that connects earth and heaven, matter and spirit, human and divine consciousness. Surrounding this central figure are rows of smaller beings, often called angels by early Spanish chroniclers who saw in them reflections of their own religious imagery, though their actual significance is likely far more complex and profound. These figures appear to be in procession, moving toward the central deity in attitudes of reverence, worship, or perhaps presentation of offerings. Each carries objects whose meanings have been lost to time, but whose careful depiction suggests they played important roles in the ceremonial and spiritual life of the Tiahuanaco people. The precision of these carvings is breathtaking when examined closely. with details so fine they could have been created by modern machine tools, yet accomplished using bronze and stone implements, by artisans working at an altitude where every breath requires effort and every movement must be deliberate and considered. The faces of the smaller figures display individual characteristics, suggesting they may represent specific individuals, perhaps priests, rulers, or ancestors, whose importance to the community merited inclusion in this cosmic tableau. As you allow your consciousness to drift deeper into the peaceful state between waking and sleeping, imagine standing before the gateway during one of the astronomical events for which it appears to have been designed. During the winter solstice, the sun rises in perfect alignment with the portal, sending a beam of light through the rectangular opening that illuminates specific portions of the surrounding archaeological complex, creating a natural spotlight that seems to awaken the very stones with divine radiance. This alignment is no coincidence, but the result of careful observation and mathematical calculation spanning generations, evidence of a civilization that understood time not as a linear progression, but as a series of cycles within cycles, cosmic wheels within cosmic wheels, each turning according to celestial rhythms that could be observed, predicted, and ceremonially honored. The gateway served not just as a monument to their gods, but as a practical astronomical instrument, a calendar carved in stone that marked the turning of seasons, the optimal times for planting and harvesting, the moments when the barriers between dimensions grew thin enough to permit communion between human and divine consciousness. During these special alignments, when sunlight and shadow create patterns across the carved surface that are visible only at specific times and seasons, the gateway reveals additional layers of meaning, hidden messages that emerge like secret knowledge waiting for the properly prepared observer. Shadows cast by the raised portions of the carving create new images, transform familiar figures into different configurations, and sometimes reveal entirely new symbols that exist only in these moments of perfect astronomical alignment. The spiritual significance of passing through the gateway appears to have been central to Tiahuanaco religious practice, though the exact nature of the ceremonies conducted here remains tantalizingly mysterious. Archaeological evidence suggests that the area around the monument was carefully paved and maintained, creating a ritual space where processions could approach the portal in ordered fashion, where offerings could be made to the carved deities, and where initiates might undergo transformative experiences designed to expand their understanding of their place in the cosmic order. Imagine the sound of conch shells echoing across the high plateau as priests announce the beginning of ceremony, their deep tones carrying across miles in the thin air, calling the community to gather at this most sacred spot. Picture the sight of hundreds of people dressed in textiles of brilliant color approaching the gateway, in slow procession, each carrying offerings of coca leaves, precious metals, or specially prepared foods, their movements choreographed to mirror the stately dance of celestial bodies across the Andean sky. The gateway stands today much as it has for over 1,000 years, though the wooden structures that once surrounded it, the colorful textiles that once adorned it, the golden ornaments that once caught and reflected the highland sun, all these have returned to dust, leaving only the essential monument, the stone bones of a vision too powerful to be destroyed by time or weather or the rise and fall of civilizations. Yet something of the original power remains, something that transcends the merely archaeological or historical, and speaks directly to the part of human consciousness that recognizes sacred space, that responds to beauty and mystery, with expansion rather than explanation, that finds in the presence of the truly magnificent a gateway to experiences that language cannot adequately describe, but that memory holds forever. Modern visitors often report profound experiences while standing before the gateway, moments of expanded awareness, feelings of connection to something vast and benevolent, insights that seem to arrive not through thinking, but through some more direct form of transmission, as if the monument continues to function as it was originally designed, as a technology for facilitating communion between ordinary human consciousness and the infinite intelligence that designed and sustains the cosmos. As you rest now in the growing stillness of your evening sanctuary, allow yourself to feel the presence of this ancient portal, to sense its invitation to walk through not just physical space, but through the more mysterious territories of inner landscape, where symbols become experiences, where carved stone becomes living wisdom, and where the boundary between dreamer and dream dissolves into the profound peace that comes from recognizing yourself as both observer and observed, both seeker and sought, both human and divine, held always in the loving awareness that carved itself into stone, so that even across vast expanses of time, the essential message would remain clear and available to any consciousness prepared to receive it with an open heart and a quiet mind. There are moments in our encounter with the ancient world when the familiar boundaries of possibility seem to dissolve, when we stand face to face with achievements that humble our modern assumptions about what ancient peoples could accomplish with bronze tools and human determination. As your consciousness drifts deeper into the peaceful realm between waking and sleeping, allow yourself to approach the most enigmatic aspect of Tiahuanaco, the massive stone blocks that seem to whisper secrets about construction techniques that challenge everything we think we know about the capabilities of pre-Columbian civilizations. Picture yourself walking among these monuments in the soft light of early morning, when dew still clings to the ancient surfaces, and the first rays of sun reveal details that casual observation might miss. Your hand reaches out to touch the surface of a stone block, and immediately you notice something extraordinary. The surface is not rough-hewn or approximately shaped, as you might expect from ancient masonry, but polished to a smoothness that rivals modern machine work, fitted against its neighbors with a precision that would challenge contemporary stonemasons equipped with laser levels and computer-controlled cutting tools. The famous H-blocks of Tiahuanaco stand like sentinels throughout the complex, each one carved from red sandstone into shapes so geometrically perfect they seem almost crystalline in their regularity. These stones, some standing nearly 20 feet tall and weighing dozens of tons, display a level of mathematical precision that speaks to knowledge systems far more sophisticated than conventional archaeology typically attributes to ancient civilizations. When measured with modern instruments, the angles prove to be accurate to fractions of degrees, the surfaces flat to tolerances that would satisfy aerospace manufacturing standards. But precision, remarkable as it is, represents only the beginning of the mystery. How were blocks weighing 40, 60, even 100 tons transported across the rolling terrain of the Altiplano from the quarries located many miles away? The red sandstone of the H-blocks originates from quarries near Copacabana, requiring transport across 15 miles of challenging terrain without the benefit of wheeled vehicles or large domesticated animals. The andesite used for the Gateway of the Sun comes from quarries even more distant, across the waters of Lake Titicaca itself, presenting logistical challenges that would daunt modern construction crews equipped with cranes, trucks, and heavy machinery. As you settle more deeply into restful contemplation, imagine the scenes that must have played out during the construction of Tiahuanaco, though imagining may not be quite the right word, for the evidence suggests techniques that stretch imagination beyond its comfortable limits. Somehow, these massive stones were not only transported across difficult terrain, but lifted, positioned, and fitted with an accuracy that modern engineers find genuinely perplexing. No mortar was used, yet the joints between blocks are so tight that even today, after centuries of weathering, you cannot slip a knife blade between them. The surfaces of many blocks display marks that appear to have been made by cutting tools, but not the bronze chisels and hammers that archaeological orthodoxy suggests were the most advanced implements available to the Tiahuanaco builders. Instead, some stones show smooth, curved cuts that look as if they were carved while the stone was soft, malleable, almost plastic in consistency. Other blocks display what can only be described as machined surfaces, with tool marks so regular and precise they seem to have been created by rotating cutting implements operating with mechanical consistency impossible to achieve by hand. Perhaps most mysterious of all are the H-shaped metal clamps that once held certain blocks together, cast in bronze and fitted into precisely cut recesses with tolerances measured in millimeters. The metal appears to have been poured into these recesses while molten, creating connections of extraordinary strength and permanence. But here emerges another puzzle. Many of these clamps show evidence of having been cut through, apparently by tools capable of slicing through bronze as easily as a knife cuts through butter. What technology possessed by ancient peoples could accomplish such feats? The interior passages and chambers within some of the larger stone constructions reveal additional mysteries that challenge conventional understanding. Walls that should require massive foundations to support their weight instead seem to float above carefully engineered void spaces, as if the builders understood principles of structural engineering that distributed massive loads through methods invisible to external observation. Sound carries through these spaces in peculiar ways, with whispers spoken in certain locations emerging amplified in distant chambers, suggesting that acoustic properties were as carefully planned as visual alignments. Some blocks display drill holes that appear to have been created by bits rotating at high speed, producing circular bores with smooth walls that taper in ways consistent with modern diamond-tipped drilling equipment, rather than the copper and bronze tools supposedly available to the Tiahuanaco builders. These holes sometimes connect through solid stone in ways that suggest the drillers could somehow see through rock to ensure perfect alignment between entry and exit points, separated by several feet of dense material. Let your consciousness drift now into the realm of speculation and wonder, that mysterious territory where unexplained evidence meets the human need to understand, where the impossible confronts the undeniable, where ancient achievements suggest knowledge systems that conventional history has not yet learned to accommodate. Could the Tiahuanaco have possessed technologies that we have lost or never developed? Did they understand properties of matter and energy that our science has yet to rediscover? Or, perhaps more intriguingly, did they have access to forms of consciousness that could interface with matter in ways our materialistic worldview cannot encompass? Indigenous traditions throughout the Andes speak of a time when stone was soft, when the ancestors possessed the ability to shape rock with their hands as easily as modern sculptors shape clay. These stories, dismissed by conventional archaeology as mythology, take on different meanings when confronted with physical evidence that seems to support exactly such capabilities. Laboratory analysis of some Tiahuanaco stones has revealed crystalline structures that appear to have been reorganized at the molecular level, as if the stone had indeed been rendered plastic during construction, and then allowed to reharden into configurations impossible to achieve through conventional carving techniques. The vitrification found on some surfaces presents another puzzle that orthodox explanations struggle to address satisfactorily. These areas show evidence of having been subjected to intense heat that partially melted the stone surface, creating glass-like coatings that could not have been produced by any known ancient technology. Yet, the vitrification appears intentional rather than accidental, following patterns that suggest controlled application of precisely directed energy sources capable of heating stone to temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Recent investigations using ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive technologies have revealed that the visible portions of Tiahuanaco represent only a small fraction of what lies beneath the surface. Vast underground networks of precisely cut chambers, tunnels, and passages extend in all directions from the surface monuments, creating three-dimensional complexes of staggering scope and sophistication. Some of these underground spaces appear to have been carved directly into bedrock, with the same precision evident in the surface constructions, while others are lined with fitted stone blocks that rival the finest work visible above ground. The acoustic properties of these underground spaces prove even more remarkable than those of the surface structures. Certain chambers appear to have been designed as resonance cavities, amplifying and focusing sound in ways that create profound psychological effects in visitors. Chanting or singing in these spaces produces overtones and harmonics that seem to induce altered states of consciousness, suggesting that the builders understood sound as a technology for consciousness expansion rather than merely communication or entertainment. As your breathing deepens and your awareness expands in the comfortable darkness of your bedroom, allow yourself to feel the presence of these speaking stones, these monuments that continue to pose questions that humble our assumptions about the past and challenge our beliefs about the limitations of human capability. Whether the techniques used by the Tiahuanaco builders involved lost technologies, expanded consciousness, or capabilities that bridge the material and spiritual realms in ways our current understanding cannot accommodate, their achievements stand as testimony to human potential that transcends the boundaries of conventional possibility. The stones of Tiahuanaco speak not just of engineering mastery, but of a civilization that refused to accept the limitations that lesser cultures take for granted. They remind us that consciousness itself may be the ultimate technology, that expanded awareness may be capable of achievements that surpass any external tool or implement. In the profound silence that surrounds these ancient monuments, in the questions they pose and the mysteries they embody, we encounter an invitation to expand our own sense of what consciousness can accomplish when it aligns itself with the deeper principles that govern the dance between mind and matter, between human intention and cosmic possibility. Perhaps the most remarkable achievement of the Tiahuanaco builders was not their precision or their strength, but their vision of what was possible when human consciousness dedicated itself completely to creating something worthy of the infinite intelligence that moves through all creation. These stones continue to speak of that vision, continue to invite us to remember capacities we have forgotten, continue to demonstrate that the boundary between the possible and impossible is far more permeable than our everyday minds typically allow us to perceive. Above the high plains of Bolivia, where the air is so thin that stars seem close enough to pluck like luminous fruit from the cosmic tree, the night sky reveals itself with a clarity and brilliance that transforms astronomy from abstract science into living poetry. As you rest deeper into the peaceful embrace of sleep, allow your consciousness to drift upward from the ancient stones of Tiahuanaco into the celestial sphere that served as both calendar and cathedral for the remarkable civilization that built their sacred city as a bridge between earth and heaven. The Tiahuanaco understood something that our electrically illuminated modern world has largely forgotten: that human consciousness naturally expands when exposed to the unfiltered majesty of the night sky, that the patterns traced by celestial bodies across the dome of darkness provide not just practical information about seasons and navigation, but spiritual guidance about our place in the vast orchestration of existence itself. At 13,000 feet above sea level, with minimal atmospheric interference and no artificial light pollution, the Altiplano night sky displays itself in configurations of such breathtaking beauty that gazing upward inevitably becomes a form of prayer. Picture yourself lying on a woven blanket beside the gateway of the sun, in the deep hours of an Andean night, when the Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of light flowing through the cosmic landscape, when planets hang like jewels against the infinite velvet darkness, when meteor showers trace fleeting signatures of fire across the stellar tapestry. This is astronomy as the ancients experienced it, not as photographs in textbooks or data from distant telescopes, but as immediate, overwhelming encounter with the infinite intelligence that designed and sustains the universe. Archaeological investigation has revealed that Tiahuanaco was designed as a vast astronomical instrument, with every major structure positioned to mark significant celestial events with an accuracy that rivals modern observatories. The Gateway of the Sun serves as the centerpiece of this stone calendar, but it functions as part of a larger complex of alignments that track not just the obvious movements of sun and moon, but the more subtle cycles of planetary motion, precession, and the rising and setting of specific constellations that held deep significance in Tiahuanaco cosmology. During the winter solstice, when the sun reaches its furthest point north and begins its return journey toward the southern hemisphere, observers positioned at specific points throughout the Tiahuanaco complex can witness the solar disk rising in perfect alignment with key architectural features, sending beams of light through carefully positioned openings to illuminate sacred symbols carved into interior walls. This moment marks not just the astronomical turning of the year, but a spiritual renewal, a cosmic confirmation that the cycles of death and rebirth continue to turn, according to divine plan. The spring and autumn equinoxes create their own spectacular displays, with shadows cast by the massive stone monuments creating geometric patterns across the ceremonial plazas that appear only twice each year, transforming the entire archaeological site into a giant sundial capable of marking time with precision that would satisfy the most demanding modern chronometer. But these alignments served purposes beyond mere timekeeping, creating opportunities for the community to gather in collective acknowledgement of their participation in the great cosmic dance. Let your awareness drift now into the sophisticated mathematical understanding that such precise alignments required, recognizing that the Tiahuanaco astronomers possessed knowledge that integrated observation, calculation, and architectural implementation across spans of time that encompassed multiple generations. Creating alignments accurate across centuries required not just careful observation of current celestial positions, but understanding of how those positions would shift due to the slow wobble of Earth's axis known as precession, a phenomenon that modern astronomy only documented in recent centuries. The constellation patterns that rise and set at specific times throughout the year held deep mythological significance for the Tiahuanaco people, with star groups corresponding to deities, ancestors, and symbolic animals that populated their rich tradition of cosmic storytelling. The Southern Cross, clearly visible in the Andean sky, appears to have served as a celestial anchor point around which other observations were organized, its reliable presence providing a stable reference for tracking the more complex movements of planets and seasonal constellations. Venus, the brilliant evening and morning star that the Romans named for their goddess of love and beauty, held particularly important significance in Tiahuanaco astronomy, with several structures aligned to mark the extreme northern and southern points of its cyclical journey across the sky. This planet's complex 8-year cycle, during which it traces a perfect 5-pointed star pattern against the background of fixed stars, appears to have been incorporated into the ceremonial calendar that governed religious observances and agricultural timing throughout the Tiahuanaco cultural sphere. The careful tracking of lunar cycles enabled precise prediction of eclipses, those dramatic moments when the normal order of day and night temporarily reverses, when the sun darkens or the moon takes on the color of blood, events that ancient peoples understood as communications from the cosmic powers that govern existence. The ability to predict such phenomena would have enhanced the authority of the priestly class while providing the entire community with confidence that their spiritual leaders possessed genuine insight into the workings of divine intelligence. Jupiter and Saturn, those slow-moving giants whose conjunctions occur only once every 20 years, appear to have been tracked with particular care. Their meetings in the sky, marking major ceremonial cycles, and perhaps significant political or social transitions. The Tiahuanaco understanding of these planetary rhythms suggests astronomical knowledge, sophisticated enough to maintain accuracy across multiple centuries, requiring institutional continuity and systematic record-keeping that speaks to a highly organized and stable civilization. As your consciousness drifts deeper into the peaceful state between waking and sleeping, imagine standing among the Tiahuanaco astronomers during one of their night-long observing sessions, your breath visible in the cold highland air as you join them in patient contemplation of celestial movements that unfold across timescales that dwarf individual human lives. These were not casual stargazers, but dedicated scientists whose careful observations provided the foundation for agricultural timing, religious ceremony, and social organization throughout their extensive cultural influence. The acoustic properties of certain structures at Tiahuanaco suggest that sound played an important role in astronomical observation, with specially designed chambers that amplify and focus even whispered communications, enabling coordinated observations by teams of astronomers positioned at different vantage points throughout the complex. The precision required for accurate celestial measurements would have demanded sophisticated communication protocols, with observers calling out the exact moments when celestial bodies crossed architectural sight lines or achieved specific alignments with carved markers. underground chambers recently discovered through ground-penetrating radar appear to have been designed as controlled environments for astronomical calculation and record-keeping. Spaces where the delicate work of converting observations into predictive models could be conducted without interference from weather or other environmental variables. Some of these spaces show evidence of having contained sophisticated mechanical devices, perhaps computational aids for tracking the complex cycles that govern celestial mechanics. The integration of astronomical knowledge with architectural design at Tiahuanaco represents one of humanity's earliest attempts to create what we might now call a multimedia educational environment, where abstract mathematical concepts could be experienced through direct sensory encounter with precisely positioned stone monuments. Students of astronomy could literally walk through the movements of celestial bodies, understanding planetary cycles not through written texts or numerical tables, but through embodied experience of properly aligned architectural spaces. Modern archaeoastronomers continue to discover new alignments and celestial connections throughout the Tiahuanaco complex, suggesting that our understanding of the site's astronomical functions remains incomplete. Computer simulations of ancient sky conditions reveal alignments with stellar configurations that were visible 1,000 years ago but have since shifted due to precession, demonstrating the remarkable foresight of builders who created monuments designed to function accurately across multiple centuries of gradual celestial change. The profound integration of astronomy, architecture, and spiritual practice at Tiahuanaco offers a vision of human civilization organized around conscious participation in cosmic rhythms, rather than opposition to natural cycles. Their understanding of time as circular rather than linear allowed them to build for eternity, creating structures that continue to mark celestial events with accuracy that amazes contemporary observers, reminding us that true science and genuine spirituality need not be separate pursuits, but different aspects of the same fundamental quest to understand our place in the magnificent orchestration of existence that surrounds us always, whether we remember to look up at the stars or not. In the deepest layers of Andean memory, in the stories passed down through generations of voices that spoke languages older than writing, in the dreams that come to those who sleep beside the sacred waters of Lake Titicaca, there echoes a tale of such profound beauty and mystery that it seems less like mythology and more like memory, a collective remembrance of a time when the boundary between the divine and mortal realms was as permeable as morning mist rising from the lake's ancient waters. As your consciousness drifts deeper into the peaceful realm, where stories become more real than the everyday world, where symbols speak directly to the soul without need of intellectual translation, allow yourself to be carried back to the time before time, to the age when Viracocha, the great creator deity, emerged from the sacred depths of Lake Titicaca to bring order and beauty to a world that existed in primordial darkness and chaos. Picture the scene as the indigenous peoples of the Andes have envisioned it for countless generations. The vast lake, stretching like a mirror of obsidian beneath a sky that had not yet learned the difference between day and night, its waters holding the potential for all creation, like a cosmic womb waiting for the moment of divine conception. From these dark depths rises a figure of such radiant majesty that the very waters seem to part in reverence. A being whose presence transforms darkness into light, chaos into harmony, emptiness into the fullness of existence itself. Viracocha emerges not as a distant deity ruling from some heavenly throne, but as consciousness itself taking form, as the fundamental creative intelligence that underlies all existence, choosing to manifest in a way that mortal minds could perceive and mortal hearts could recognize as the source of all love, all wisdom, all beauty that would ever grace the world. The deity's form shifts and changes, like light reflected on water, sometimes appearing as a bearded figure whose eyes hold the depth of infinite compassion, sometimes manifesting as pure radiance that illuminates everything it touches with the recognition of its own divine nature. With gestures that seem to sculpt reality from the malleable substance of possibility itself, Viracocha begins the great work of creation, calling forth the sun and moon from the depths of cosmic potential, positioning them in the sky with such precision that their movements would forever after mark the rhythms of earthly life, the cycles of planting and harvest, the ceremonies that would connect human consciousness to the greater cosmic dance that governs all existence. The creation of the sun represents more than the simple provision of light and warmth, for in the Andean understanding, the solar disk serves as the visible manifestation of divine consciousness itself. The eye of Viracocha, through which the creator deity maintains constant watch over all creation, ensuring that the principles of harmony, balance, and beauty continue to guide the unfolding of existence through all the ages to come. From the newly illuminated landscape, Viracocha calls forth the first human beings, not as separate creations struggling to survive in an indifferent universe, but as conscious expressions of divine intelligence itself, beings capable of recognizing their own divine nature and living in conscious harmony with the creative principles that govern all existence. These first humans are described in the ancient stories as giants, in both physical stature and spiritual development, beings who possessed capabilities that later generations would remember only in legends and dreams. Let your awareness drift now into the golden age that followed, the time that indigenous memory preserves as an era of perfect harmony between human consciousness and divine will, when the people possessed technologies that worked with natural forces rather than against them, when agriculture produced abundance without depletion, when architecture achieved beauty without violence to the landscape, when social organization reflected cosmic principles of balance and reciprocity. This was the age when stones could be shaped with intention rather than force, when human consciousness possessed the ability to interface directly with matter, transforming the molecular structure of rock through focused awareness rather than crude mechanical manipulation. The great monuments of Tiahuanaco, according to these traditions, were built during this golden time by humans whose expanded consciousness allowed them to work as co-creators with divine intelligence, producing architectural achievements that continue to puzzle archaeologists precisely because they were created through capabilities that later humanity forgot it ever possessed. The stories speak of a time when communication transcended the limitations of spoken language, when thoughts and feelings could be transmitted directly from consciousness to consciousness, when the barrier between individual minds dissolved into a collective awareness that allowed entire communities to function as unified organisms guided by shared wisdom and common purpose. Knowledge was not stored in written texts, but held in living memory, transmitted through direct experience rather than abstract study, integrated into daily life rather than compartmentalized into specialized disciplines. But like all golden ages in the mythology of human cultures, this time of the perfection contained within it the seeds of its own transformation, The ancient stories tell of a gradual forgetting, a slow drift away from conscious alignment with divine principles, as some humans began to use their expanded capabilities for personal aggrandizement rather than collective benefit, as the harmony between individual will and cosmic intelligence began to fracture and discord, entered the previously perfect world. The great flood that followed was not divine punishment, but natural consequence, the inevitable result of consciousness that had lost its alignment with the creative principles that maintain cosmic harmony. When human awareness ceased to function as a clear channel for divine intelligence, the delicate balance that sustained the Golden Age civilization began to collapse, and the waters that had once been held in perfect equilibrium by consciousness, working in harmony with natural law, rose to reclaim the land and wash away the monuments to human pride and forgetfulness. But Viracocha, in infinite compassion, did not abandon creation to the consequences of its own forgetfulness. As the waters began to rise, the great deity gathered the seeds of wisdom, the essential teachings and technologies that would be needed for the renewal that would eventually come, preserving them in forms that could survive the coming deluge and remain available for rediscovery when human consciousness had evolved sufficiently to receive them once again. Some of these seeds of wisdom were preserved in stone, encoded in the architectural alignments and symbolic carvings that would puzzle future archaeologists. Others were embedded in the landscape itself, in the positioning of sacred sites and the acoustic properties of natural formations that could transmit knowledge to those who knew how to listen. Still others were woven into the genetic memory of indigenous peoples, preserved in stories and ceremonies that would maintain their essential truths across millennia of surface forgetting. As the waters of the Great Flood receded and the survivors began the slow work of rebuilding civilization, Viracocha walked among them as teacher and guide, helping them remember the fundamental principles that could prevent future disasters while respecting their freedom to choose their own path of development. The deity's teachings emphasize the importance of maintaining harmony between human consciousness and natural law, of using whatever capabilities humans possessed in service of the greater good rather than personal aggrandizement, of remembering always that consciousness itself is the ultimate technology, and that expanded awareness brings with it expanded responsibility. The memory of Viracocha's presence among the survivors is preserved in stories of a bearded teacher who traveled throughout the Andes, establishing sacred sites, teaching agricultural techniques, sharing knowledge of astronomy and mathematics, and always emphasizing the spiritual principles that must guide the application of any powerful knowledge. When this teaching's mission was complete, the stories tell us Viracocha walked westward across the waters of the Pacific Ocean, promising to return when humanity had evolved sufficiently to receive the full restoration of the Golden Age capabilities. As your consciousness drifts deeper into the peaceful state between waking and sleeping, allow yourself to feel the presence of these ancient memories, these stories that speak not just of distant history, but of potentials that remain alive within human consciousness, waiting for the right conditions to manifest once again. The floodwaters have long since receded, but the seeds of wisdom that Viracocha planted continue to germinate in the hearts and minds of those who approach the ancient stories not as primitive mythology, but as encoded transmissions from levels of consciousness that transcend the limitations of ordinary awareness. Perhaps the most profound teaching embedded in these creation stories is the recognition that consciousness itself is creative, that the quality of human awareness directly influences the nature of physical reality, that the Golden Age is not a distant historical period, but a potential that exists eternally within expanded consciousness, waiting to be remembered and reclaimed by any individual or civilization wise enough to align their awareness with the fundamental creative principles that Viracocha embodied and taught. Beneath the windswept surface of Tiahuanaco, beneath the massive stone blocks that have captured the imagination of archaeologists and dreamers for centuries, lies another world entirely, a vast network of underground chambers, passages and halls that suggest the visible monuments represent only the uppermost layer of a far more extensive and sophisticated complex than anyone previously imagined. As your consciousness drifts deeper into the realm of peaceful sleep, allow your awareness to descend with me into these hidden depths, where modern ground-penetrating radar has revealed secrets that challenge everything we thought we knew about the scope and sophistication of this ancient civilization. Picture yourself floating gently downward through layers of earth and time, past the familiar surface structures, past the carefully laid foundations visible to casual observation, into a subterranean realm where carefully carved passages stretch in all directions, like the arteries of some vast stone organism, designed to channel energies and intentions that we can barely begin to understand. The precision evident in the surface constructions extends seamlessly into these underground spaces, with walls cut to tolerances that would satisfy modern engineering standards, joints fitted so perfectly that centuries of groundwater and seismic activity have failed to disturb their structural integrity. Recent technological surveys have revealed that these underground networks extend for miles in every direction from the visible archaeological site, creating a three-dimensional complex of staggering proportions and that suggests Tiahuanaco was never merely a ceremonial center or administrative capital, but something far more ambitious and mysterious, perhaps a kind of terrestrial model of cosmic principles, an attempt to create on Earth a physical representation of the divine architecture that governs the heavens themselves. Some of these underground chambers appear to have been carved directly from bedrock, using techniques that leave no tool marks on the smooth walls, as if the stone had been somehow dissolved or melted rather than chiseled away through conventional mechanical means. The resulting spaces display acoustic properties that transform even the softest whisper into resonant tones that seem to linger in the air long after their source has fallen silent, creating environments where sound itself becomes a medium for consciousness expansion and perhaps communication with non-physical dimensions of reality. Let your awareness descend deeper into these mysterious spaces, imagining the sensation of cool stone beneath your feet as you walk through corridors that have remained sealed since before the rise of the Inca Empire, before the arrival of European colonizers, perhaps since the Great Flood itself washed away the surface civilization and left these underground treasures hidden beneath layers of sediment and forgetting. The air here carries a quality of profound stillness that goes beyond mere absence of sound, a silence pregnant with accumulated wisdom and patient waiting. Deep beneath the gateway of the sun, radar imaging has detected what appears to be a circular chamber of enormous proportions, its walls decorated with carvings that mirror and expand upon the iconographic program visible on the surface monument. This hidden sanctum seems to have served as the true heart of whatever spiritual and ceremonial activities took place at Tiahuanaco. The inner temple, where only the most initiated priests and practitioners would have been permitted to enter, where the deepest mysteries of the tradition would have been preserved and transmitted across generations of carefully trained guardians. The engineering required to create stable underground spaces of such magnitude in an earthquake-prone region demonstrates mastery of structural principles that challenge conventional assumptions about ancient capabilities. These chambers appear to have been designed to withstand not just the normal settling and shifting of geological time, but catastrophic events that might destroy surface structures while leaving the underground sanctuaries intact, as if the builders anticipated the possibility of civilizational collapse and wanted to ensure that their most important knowledge would survive whatever disasters might befall the world above. Water management throughout these underground complexes reveals another layer of sophisticated understanding, with channels and drainage systems that continue to function after more than 1,000 years, maintaining optimal humidity levels for the preservation of whatever materials might have been stored in these hidden vaults. Some passages appear to have been designed to channel groundwater in ways that create specific acoustic effects, transforming the sound of flowing water into musical tones that vary with seasonal changes in water table levels, creating a kind of hydraulic organ that marks the passage of time through naturally generated harmony. Certain chambers show evidence of having contained fires that burned for extended periods, with ventilation systems ingeniously designed to provide fresh air while preventing smoke from accumulating in occupied spaces. The positioning of these fire chambers suggests they may have served ceremonial purposes, perhaps as spaces where sacred flames were maintained as focal points for meditation and prayer, where the hypnotic dance of firelight against carved stone walls created conditions conducive to expanded states of consciousness and direct communion with divine intelligence. The most intriguing discoveries are the chambers that appear to have housed mechanical devices of unknown purpose, with precisely cut mounting points for complex assemblages that have long since been removed or destroyed, leaving only tantalizing clues about the nature of the technologies that once operated in these underground sanctuaries. Tool marks on these mounting surfaces suggest that whatever equipment was installed here operated with moving parts, perhaps early computers or calculating devices for tracking astronomical cycles, or more mysterious instruments for purposes that our current understanding of ancient capabilities cannot accommodate. Storage chambers throughout the complex reveal evidence of having contained vast libraries of knowledge, not in the form of written texts, but in more durable media designed to survive across millennia of potential civilizational disruption. Some walls show mounting points for what appear to have been crystalline storage devices, perhaps quartz formations that could hold information in their molecular structure, a form of data storage that would remain stable and accessible long after organic materials had returned to dust. The acoustic properties of different chambers appear to have been precisely engineered for specific purposes, with some spaces designed to amplify and focus sound for communication across the vast underground network, while others seem intended to create resonant frequencies that induce particular states of consciousness in occupants. Modern visitors to similar underground acoustic spaces report experiences of profound peace, expanded awareness, and sometimes direct insights or visions that seem to emerge from the spaces themselves rather than from personal imagination or expectation. As your consciousness drifts deeper into the peaceful realm of sleep, allow yourself to feel the presence of these hidden sanctuaries these chambers that continue to wait patiently beneath the earth for a humanity evolved enough to understand and properly utilize the wisdom they contain. Perhaps the most profound mystery is not what technologies or knowledge the underground chambers once housed, but why they were sealed and abandoned, whether by conscious choice, as their guardians prepared for the end of their civilization, or by catastrophic events that came too suddenly for proper preparation. The underground network of Tiahuanaco represents more than architectural achievement or ancient technology. It embodies a vision of civilization that prepared for continuity across vast spans of time, that understood knowledge as something too precious to risk to the uncertainties of surface existence, that invested enormous effort in creating sanctuaries where the deepest wisdom could weather any storm. These hidden chambers speak of a people who thought in terms of eternity rather than mere decades, who built not just for their own generation, but for future seekers who might someday prove worthy of the treasures they guarded beneath the stones. There comes a moment in the life of every civilization when the delicate balance between human ambition and natural harmony begins to shift, when the forces that once sustained greatness gradually transform into the seeds of decline, when even the most magnificent achievements of consciousness and stone must bow before the inexorable rhythms of cosmic change. As your awareness drifts deeper into the peaceful realm between waking and sleeping, allow yourself to witness with compassionate understanding the gradual transformation of Tiahuanaco from living ceremonial center to the haunting ruins that speak to us today across the silence of centuries. The decline of this remarkable civilization appears to have unfolded slowly across several generations, beginning sometime around 1000 to CE, though the exact causes remain as mysterious as the techniques used to build the monuments that would outlast the culture that created them. Archaeological evidence suggests not a sudden catastrophe but a gradual weakening. Like a great tree whose roots slowly lose their grip in soil that has become too dry or too depleted to sustain the magnificent canopy that once reached toward the sky with such confidence and grace. Climate records preserved in ice cores from the nearby Quelcaya Glacier tell a story of increasing environmental stress during this period, with evidence of prolonged droughts that would have challenged even the sophisticated agricultural systems that had sustained the Tiahuanaco population for centuries. The raised field systems that had once transformed the harsh Altiplano environment into productive farmland required consistent water levels to maintain their delicate balance, and as precipitation patterns shifted and Lake Titicaca began its slow retreat from the shoreline settlements, the foundation of Tiahuanaco prosperity gradually eroded. Picture the scene during these difficult years, when the morning mist no longer rose as abundantly from the sacred lake, when the carefully engineered canals that had once carried life-giving water to distant fields began to run shallow and intermittent, when the agricultural specialists who had maintained the complex irrigation systems for generations found themselves struggling against changes that seemed to emanate from the very cosmos itself, as if the celestial powers they had served so faithfully were withdrawing their support for reasons beyond mortal understanding. The social fabric of Tiahuanaco civilization, so carefully woven from threads of shared spiritual vision, astronomical knowledge, and collective purpose, began to show signs of strain as environmental pressures mounted and traditional solutions proved inadequate to address the new challenges. Disputes may have arisen between different communities within the Confederation over access to diminishing water resources. while the priestly class that had long provided guidance, based on their understanding of cosmic cycles, found their authority questioned when their ceremonies and calculations seemed unable to restore the abundance that had been taken for granted for so many generations. Let your consciousness drift into empathy for these people as they watched their world slowly changing in ways that challenged everything they had believed about their relationship with the divine forces that governed existence. The astronomical alignments that had once provided reliable guidance for agricultural timing began to seem less relevant when weather patterns shifted beyond the predictive power of traditional knowledge, when the carefully observed cycles of celestial bodies no longer corresponded to the environmental conditions necessary for successful farming at such challenging altitudes. As resources became scarcer and traditional certainties crumbled, the cooperative spirit that had enabled the massive construction projects of earlier eras gradually gave way to more competitive and defensive attitudes. Communities that had once freely shared knowledge, materials, and labor began to focus more narrowly on their own immediate survival, undermining the networks of reciprocity and mutual support that had been essential to maintaining complex infrastructure across the vast distances of the Altiplano. The magnificent ceremonial centers that had once drawn pilgrims and traders from across the Andean world began to seem less relevant as daily survival became more pressing than spiritual contemplation. Fewer people made the difficult journey to participate in the great festivals and astronomical observations that had once united the far-flung communities of the Tiahuanaco cultural sphere, and without this constant influx of participants, resources, and renewed spiritual energy, the ceremonial sites gradually lost their vitality and centrality in regional life. Archaeological evidence suggests that during this period of decline, some of the most sacred objects and knowledge systems may have been deliberately hidden or removed from Tiahuanaco, perhaps by priest guardians who recognized that the civilization was entering a period of vulnerability and wanted to ensure that the most precious wisdom would survive whatever transitions lay ahead. The underground chambers we explored in our previous journey may have been sealed during this time, their contents either relocated to safer sanctuaries or carefully preserved for future generations who might prove more capable of understanding and utilizing such profound knowledge. The great stone monuments themselves began their long transformation from living ceremonial spaces to silent witnesses of departed glory. Without regular maintenance and ritual activation, the precision-engineered structures gradually accumulated sediment blown by the ceaseless Altiplano winds, their astronomical alignments still perfect, but no longer serving communities that possessed the knowledge and social organization necessary to utilize them effectively. As you rest deeper into peaceful sleep, imagine the last ceremonies conducted at the gateway of the sun, when perhaps only a handful of elderly priests still remembered the complete ritual sequences that had once engaged hundreds of participants, when the great stone portals still framed the sunrise with mathematical precision, but no longer served as the focal point for a civilization-wide celebration of cosmic harmony and renewal. The sadness of such moments is profound, yet there is also dignity in the careful preservation of sacred knowledge, even as its immediate application becomes impossible. The abandonment of Tiahuanaco appears to have been gradual rather than sudden, with populations slowly dispersing to smaller settlements better adapted to the changing environmental conditions, carrying with them whatever portable knowledge and cultural traditions they could maintain without the support of the great ceremonial centers. Some may have migrated to the Amazon basin, where different environmental conditions offered new possibilities for sustainable civilization, while others remained in the highlands, adapting their lifestyle to smaller-scale communities that could survive without the complex infrastructure their ancestors had created. The wind and rain that had once blessed the ceremonial plazas with life-giving moisture now began their slow work of reclaiming the abandoned structures, covering the carefully laid stones with layers of soil and vegetation, gradually transforming the once vibrant city into the mysterious ruins that would puzzle later visitors and inspire countless theories about lost civilizations and forgotten wisdom. Yet even in decline and abandonment, Tiahuanaco retained a kind of power that transcended its material circumstances, continuing to attract indigenous peoples who recognized something sacred in the massive stones and precise alignments, even when the specific knowledge of their original purpose had been lost. Local communities maintained oral traditions that preserved fragments of the ancient wisdom, keeping alive stories of the time when gods walked among humans, and stone could be shaped by consciousness alone, ensuring that some connection to the profound vision that had created Tiahuanaco would survive across the centuries of surface forgetting. The true tragedy of Tiahuanaco's decline may not be the loss of buildings or technologies, but the interruption of a form of human civilization that had achieved genuine harmony between consciousness and cosmos, between human ambition and natural law, between individual development and collective wisdom. The stones remain to remind us that such harmony is possible, that human beings are capable of creating societies organized around principles higher than mere survival or material accumulation. That consciousness itself can serve as the foundation for achievements that transcend the limitations that lesser civilizations accept as inevitable. For 400 years after the last echoes of Tiahuanaco's ceremonial life had faded into silence, the great stone monuments slept beneath accumulating layers of earth and vegetation, patient as only stone can be, waiting for the wheel of time to turn again toward recognition and understanding. As your consciousness drifts peacefully in that quiet space between waking and sleeping, allow yourself to witness the gradual awakening of modern interest in this ancient wonder, the slow process by which forgotten ruins began once again to capture human imagination and inspire the profound questions that lead consciousness toward expanded understanding. The Spanish conquistadors who swept through the Andes in the 16th century encountered Tiahuanaco as a collection of mysterious ruins that even the local indigenous peoples regarded with a mixture of reverence and puzzlement, their specific knowledge of the site's original purpose having been lost during the centuries of abandonment, though oral traditions still preserved fragments of stories about gods and giants, about a time when the world was different and human beings possessed capabilities that had since been forgotten. Picture those early European visitors, men whose worldview had been shaped by classical Mediterranean civilizations and medieval Christian cosmology, suddenly confronted with architectural achievements that challenged their assumptions about what pre-Columbian peoples could accomplish without the supposed advantages of old-world technology and knowledge. The precision of the stonework, the mathematical sophistication evident in the astronomical alignments, the sheer audacity of creating such monuments at an altitude that left visitors gasping for breath, all of this must have seemed almost supernatural to minds unprepared for evidence of indigenous technological and spiritual sophistication. The chronicler Pedro Cieza de Leon, writing in the 1550s, described his first encounter with Tiahuanaco in language that captured both his wonder and his inability to fully comprehend what he was observing. He wrote of stones so large that it seemed impossible for human hands to have moved them, of construction techniques that surpassed anything he had seen in Europe, of an overall sense that he was standing in the presence of achievements that transcended ordinary human capabilities. His accounts, along with those of other early chroniclers, preserved the first modern descriptions of Tiahuanaco's magnificence, though filtered through European assumptions that often attributed the ruins to lost Roman colonies or biblical giants, rather than recognizing the sophisticated indigenous civilization that had actually created them. For centuries thereafter, Tiahuanaco remained largely ignored by the broader intellectual world, known mainly to local inhabitants and occasional adventurous travelers who made the difficult journey to the high Altiplano and returned with tales that seemed too extraordinary to be entirely credible. The ruins continued their patient accumulation of sediment and vegetation, their stones gradually disappearing beneath layers of earth that protected them from human interference, while simultaneously hiding their true scale and sophistication from casual observation. The 19th century brought the first systematic European attempts to document and understand Tiahuanaco, driven by the emerging disciplines of archaeology and anthropology that sought to apply scientific methods to the study of human cultural development. Explorers like Ephraim George Squire arrived with surveying instruments and cameras, creating the first precise measurements and photographic records that would allow scholars around the world to study the site without making the arduous journey to Bolivia themselves. Let your awareness drift into appreciation for these early archaeologists, working under conditions of extreme physical hardship in the thin air of the Altiplano, struggling to excavate massive stone blocks using primitive tools and methods, gradually uncovering monuments that had been hidden beneath centuries of accumulated debris. Their work revealed the true scale of Tiahuanaco for the first time in modern history, demonstrating that what had appeared to be scattered ruins were actually parts of a vast and carefully planned ceremonial complex of unprecedented sophistication. The German archaeologist Max Uhle, working in the early 20th century, applied stratigraphic excavation techniques to Tiahuanaco that revolutionized understanding of Andean prehistory, demonstrating that the site was far older than previous estimates had suggested, and that the civilization responsible for its construction had achieved levels of social organization and technical capability that challenged existing models of cultural evolution in the Americas. As excavation and documentation progressed throughout the 20th century, each new discovery seemed to deepen rather than resolve the mysteries surrounding Tiahuanaco. The precision of the astronomical alignments became more apparent as modern instruments confirmed the mathematical accuracy of ancient observations, while sophisticated techniques for moving and positioning massive stones remained as puzzling as ever to engineers familiar with modern construction methods. The work of archaeologist Arthur Posnanski, spanning several decades of the early to mid-20th century, brought unprecedented attention to Tiahuanaco's astronomical functions, though his theories about the site's extreme antiquity proved controversial and sparked debates that continue to influence archaeological interpretation today. His detailed measurements of celestial alignments and his calculations of their implications for dating the monuments inspired both admiration and skepticism from the scholarly community. While capturing the imagination of popular audiences fascinated by possibilities that conventional academic timelines seemed reluctant to accommodate. Indigenous communities throughout the region began to take renewed interest in their ancestral heritage as archaeological discoveries confirmed the sophistication of pre-Columbian civilizations. Finding in the emerging understanding of Tiahuanaco's achievements validation for oral traditions that had been dismissed or ignored by European-influenced education systems. The site became a symbol of indigenous pride and cultural continuity, a tangible demonstration that their ancestors had created one of the world's most remarkable civilizations without any need for external influence or guidance. Modern technologies brought new possibilities for investigation that previous generations of researchers could never have imagined. Ground-penetrating radar revealed the vast underground networks we explored in earlier chapters, while satellite imagery disclosed agricultural field systems extending across thousands of square miles, demonstrating that Tiahuanaco had been the center of a far more extensive and sophisticated civilization than even optimistic estimates had previously suggested. Computer modeling of ancient astronomical conditions allowed researchers to verify alignments that had shifted due to precession, confirming the extraordinary accuracy of Tiahuanaco's builders, while raising new questions about the duration and sophistication of their observational programs. Digital reconstruction techniques enabled virtual tours of the site, as it might have appeared during its period of active use. Though these technological marvels still could not fully capture the spiritual atmosphere that must have pervaded the living ceremonial center. Contemporary archaeological projects continue to reveal new aspects of Tiahuanaco's complexity, with each field season bringing discoveries that expand understanding while generating fresh mysteries. The site has become a training ground for international archaeological teams, a place where cutting-edge investigative techniques are tested and refined, where traditional archaeological methods merge with advanced technologies to create unprecedented opportunities for understanding ancient civilizations. As your consciousness rests deeper into peaceful sleep, allow yourself to feel gratitude for all those researchers, both indigenous and international, who have dedicated their lives to preserving and understanding Tiahuanaco's legacy, ensuring that the wisdom embedded in those ancient stones continues to speak to contemporary consciousness, continues to inspire questions about human potential, and the possibilities for civilizations organized around principles higher than mere material accumulation and competitive survival. The rediscovery of Tiahuanaco represents more than archaeological achievement. It embodies the gradual awakening of modern consciousness to possibilities that conventional worldviews have difficulty accommodating. The recognition that human history contains chapters of achievement and understanding that transcend the limitations we often assume to be universal and permanent. The growing awareness that consciousness itself may be the ultimate technology, capable of achievements that no external tool or method can replicate or fully explain. There are places on Earth that feel immediately familiar to certain souls, landscapes that trigger a recognition so deep and immediate that it bypasses ordinary memory and touches something that seems to exist beyond the boundaries of individual lifetime and personal experience. As your consciousness drifts into the deepest layers of peaceful sleep, allow yourself to consider the possibility that your journey to Tiahuanaco tonight might not be your first visit to those windswept heights, that your fascination with those ancient stones might arise from memories stored not in your brain, but in the eternal essence of who you truly are. Picture yourself now walking slowly across the high plateau in the golden light of late afternoon, when the massive monuments cast long shadows that seem to stretch toward infinity, and the thin air carries whispers of voices that spoke languages forgotten by history, but somehow familiar to your dreaming mind. As your feet touch the ancient stones, as your hands reach out to caress surfaces polished by hands that turned to dust centuries ago, you feel something stirring within you that goes deeper than curiosity, deeper than intellectual interest, deeper than the ordinary fascination we feel for beautiful and mysterious places. This sensation of profound familiarity is not uncommon among visitors to Tiahuanaco, and indeed to many of the world's most ancient and sacred sites. Pilgrims and travelers often report experiences that seem to transcend the normal boundaries of tourist observation, moments when the ruins cease to be external objects of study and become instead doorways into memories that feel simultaneously personal and transpersonal, individual and universal, recent and eternal. Perhaps you were there during the golden age of construction, when the great gateway of the sun was carved from living rock and positioned with mathematical precision to mark the turning of cosmic cycles that would outlast the civilization that created them. Perhaps you stood among the master builders, who somehow knew how to shape stone with consciousness rather than force, who understood that matter itself is crystallized awareness, waiting to be awakened by minds that remember their own divine nature. Let your awareness drift into that possibility now, feeling yourself among those remarkable people whose expanded consciousness allowed them to perceive the living intelligence within apparently inanimate stone, who could sense the patterns of cosmic harmony that govern both celestial mechanics and human psychology, who dedicated their lives to creating architectural expressions of principles too profound for words, but perfectly clear to minds that had learned to think in terms of eternity rather than mere decades. Feel the satisfaction of participating in work that transcended personal ambition, contributing your unique gifts to a collective vision that understood individual fulfillment as inseparable from cosmic harmony, recognizing that the greatest architecture serves not just the body, but the soul, not just the present moment, but the eternal dance of consciousness, exploring itself through countless forms and expressions across vast spans of space and time. Or perhaps your connection to Tiahuanaco comes from a later period, when you walked among the priest astronomers who maintained the sacred knowledge systems that allowed human consciousness to remain aligned with celestial rhythms, who understood that observing the movements of stars and planets was not merely practical necessity, but spiritual practice, a form of prayer that kept the community connected to the intelligence that designed and sustains the cosmos. Picture yourself participating in the midnight vigils when teams of trained observers tracked the slow dance of celestial bodies across the crystal-clear Altiplano sky, your voice joining with others in chanted calculations that preserved the mathematical relationships governing eclipses, solstices, and the complex cycles that connect earthly seasons with cosmic ages, too vast for ordinary comprehension to encompass, fully but perfectly accessible to consciousness, expanded through years of patient observation and contemplative practice. Feel the profound peace that comes from living in harmony with rhythms larger than personal desire, from understanding your individual life as part of a pattern too beautiful and complex to be perceived from any single vantage point. but revealed gradually through decades of patient attention to the recurring themes that weave through all existence, like melodies in a symphony that plays across millennia rather than mere minutes. Perhaps your sole memory of Tiahuanaco comes from the difficult period of decline, when environmental changes and social stresses challenged everything that had once seemed certain and permanent. When you stood among the dedicated guardians who made the painful decision to seal the underground chambers and preserve the sacred knowledge for future generations, who might prove more capable of understanding and utilizing such profound wisdom. Allow yourself to feel the bittersweet emotions of those final ceremonies, when perhaps only a handful of people still remembered the complete ritual sequences that had once engaged thousands of participants, when the great stone monuments still functioned with perfect precision, but no longer served communities that possessed the social cohesion necessary to utilize them effectively, when preservation took precedence over active application as the guardians of ancient wisdom prepared for a long night of forgetting. Experience the dignity and courage required to release attachment to immediate results, while maintaining absolute faith in the eternal value of consciousness expanding knowledge, understanding that wisdom itself is indestructible and will always find ways to manifest when conditions become appropriate, even if those conditions require centuries or millennia to develop fully. Or perhaps your connection to Tiahuanaco is more recent, arising from lifetimes spent in the post-abandonment period, when you were among the indigenous peoples who maintained oral traditions, preserving fragments of the ancient understanding, who continued to recognize something sacred in the massive stones, even when specific knowledge of their original purpose had been temporarily lost to ordinary memory, while remaining perfectly preserved in the deeper layers of collective consciousness. Feel the quiet satisfaction of serving as a bridge between past and future, maintaining connection to profound wisdom through the dark centuries when dominant cultures had forgotten that consciousness itself is the ultimate technology, when the primary spiritual achievement was simply remembering that human beings are capable of far more than survival and material accumulation, that we are designed for conscious participation in cosmic principles that reveal themselves to minds prepared through patience, humility, and dedicated practice. As your consciousness drifts deeper into the peaceful realm of sleep, allow yourself to recognize that regardless of when or how your soul first encountered Tiahuanaco, the essential purpose remains the same: to remember who you truly are, beneath the temporary identities and limited beliefs that ordinary consciousness mistakes for ultimate reality, to reconnect with the expanded awareness that recognizes no fundamental separation between individual and cosmos, between human and divine, between seeker and sought. The ancient monuments of Tiahuanaco continue to serve their original function as gateways to expanded consciousness, as reminders that the Golden Age is not a distant historical period, but an eternal potential that exists within awareness, freed from the limitations of conventional thinking, as invitations to remember capacities that seem impossible only from perspectives that have forgotten the ultimate nature of consciousness itself. Whether you have been to Tiahuanaco before, in previous lifetimes, or whether your familiarity arises from the deeper recognition that all sacred sites are ultimately reflections of the same eternal principles that govern consciousness everywhere, the important thing is not the specific mechanism of connection, but the recognition itself, the awakening to possibilities that transcend the boundaries ordinarily accepted as permanent and unchangeable. Tonight, as you rest in the comfortable darkness of your bedroom, you are also walking the windswept heights of the Altiplano, breathing the thin air that naturally expands awareness, touching stones that remember everything, standing before gateways that open not just into other physical spaces, but into the unlimited territories of consciousness, awakened to its own infinite nature, its own eternal presence, its own inexhaustible capacity for beauty, wisdom, and love. And so our journey draws to its gentle close, though like all true journeys into the depths of mystery and wonder, this ending is also a beginning, this conclusion also an opening into territories of consciousness that extend far beyond the boundaries of any single story or any particular night of peaceful sleep. As your breathing deepens and your body releases the last remnants of the day's tensions, allow yourself to rest in the profound recognition that Tiahuanaco has never truly been abandoned, has never actually fallen silent, has never ceased to serve its original purpose as a gateway between the ordinary world of everyday concerns and the extraordinary realm where consciousness recognizes its own unlimited nature. The stones continue their patient vigil on the high Altiplano, marking the passage of celestial cycles with the same mathematical precision that amazed their builders over 1,000 years ago, serving as eternal reminders that human consciousness is capable of achievements that transcend the limitations conventionally accepted as permanent and unchangeable. The gateway of the sun continues to frame each sunrise with perfect accuracy, continuing to offer passage to any awareness prepared to step through its ancient portal into recognition of the divine intelligence that moves through all creation. In the comfortable darkness of your bedroom, thousands of miles and many centuries removed from the windswept plateau where Viracocha first emerged from the sacred waters to bring order and beauty to primordial chaos, you carry within your own consciousness the same creative potential that built those magnificent monuments, the same capacity for expanded awareness that enabled the Tiahuanaco people to live in conscious harmony with cosmic principles that govern both stellar mechanics and human psychology. The whispers that drift across the Altiplano tonight carry more than historical information or archaeological speculation. They carry invitations to remember capacities you have never actually lost, only temporarily forgotten. To reconnect with aspects of your own nature that transcend the boundaries of individual lifetime and personal identity. To recognize yourself as both witness to and participant in the eternal dance of consciousness, exploring itself through countless forms across vast spans of space and time. As sleep embraces you with its gentle arms, as dreams begin to weave their mysterious patterns across the landscape of your resting mind, know that you are held always in the same loving awareness that inspired the builders of Tiahuanaco to dedicate their lives to creating something beautiful and permanent in service of future generations they would never meet, something that would continue to speak to human hearts across centuries of surface change and apparent forgetting. The underground chambers remain sealed beneath the ancient stones, their treasures of crystallized wisdom waiting patiently for consciousness, evolved enough to receive and properly utilize such profound knowledge. The acoustic properties that once amplified ceremonial chants continue to resonate with the subtle vibrations of your own heartbeat, your own breathing, your own quiet participation in the cosmic symphony that plays eternally whether anyone remembers to listen or not. Tiahuanaco never truly died because it was never merely a collection of buildings or a political organization or an economic system that could be destroyed by environmental change or social disruption. It was and remains a quality of consciousness, a way of perceiving and participating in existence that recognizes no fundamental separation between human and divine, between individual awareness and cosmic intelligence, between the dreamer resting peacefully in bed and the eternal observer that witnesses all dreams with infinite compassion and understanding. Tonight, you have walked where gods once walked, touched stones that remember everything, breathed air that naturally expands consciousness beyond its ordinary limitations, stood before gateways that open into dimensions of possibility that remain forever accessible to any heart prepared to receive them with openness, humility, and wonder. Rest now in the profound peace that comes from remembering your connection to something infinitely larger and more beautiful than the temporary concerns that occupy ordinary waking consciousness. Rest in the recognition that you are both individual and universal, both human and divine, both seeker and sought, held always in awareness too vast to be comprehended, but intimate enough to know you completely, to love you unconditionally, to welcome you home to the truth of who you have always been, beneath every story you have ever told yourself about limitation and separation. The gateway of the sun remains open, not just in the ruins of ancient Tiahuanaco, but in the depths of your own consciousness, where the portal between ordinary awareness and cosmic recognition awaits your recognition that you have never actually been separate from the source of all beauty, all wisdom, all love that flows through creation like sunlight through crystal clear mountain air. Sleep peacefully now, dear traveler, knowing that your journey to Tiahuanaco continues in the deeper territories of dream and rest, where the boundaries of time and space dissolve into the eternal present moment that holds all possibilities, all healing, all awakening to the profound truth that consciousness itself is the ultimate technology, the final frontier, the eternal gateway through which love recognizes itself in countless forms across the infinite dance of existence. The whispers of ancient Tiahuanaco follow you into sleep, carrying blessings of peace, wisdom, and remembrance that will continue to unfold in your consciousness long after this story has ended, long after this night has passed, long after ordinary memory has released the details of our journey together into the vast spaces of the high Altiplano, where eternity touches earth and dreams become more real than the waking world. Rest now in the gateway. Rest now in the peace. Rest now in the love that built those stones and builds your dreams and builds the very cosmos itself, one moment of infinite tenderness at a time, one breath of perfect awareness at a time, one recognition of eternal presence at a time, until all of creation awakens to the truth that there has never been anywhere to go and nothing to achieve, because we have always been exactly where we belong, exactly who we are, exactly what we came here to remember in the first place. The gateway remains open. The whispers continue. The peace is eternal, and all is well.